Today, McLaren is one of the most recognisable names in the automotive industry. You've probably never driven one, your chances of ever owning one are, well, slim to say the least. And if you've never been to London, you might not even have ever seen one, but you probably have heard the name. For those of you who have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, McLaren is a luxury exotic car brand making low volume, high performance supercars for those who don't ask how much things cost. Cars like the P1 and the 720S are really cutting edge supercars, built on a famous Formula 1 legacy, and even last generation cars like the MP4-12C, better known as simply the 12C by people with friends, are wonderfully over-engineered and by one of the most advanced automakers in the world, straddling the line between marvellous and laborious in their exploitation of engineering talent. But what lots of people don't know is that McLaren is relatively new to the scene. They aren't an old money racing incumbent like Ferrari or Porsche. In fact, McLaren Automotive, the road car centric subsidiary of McLaren Group, was only founded in 1985, and it was 1992 when they launched their first car. They called it the F1. The McLaren F1 did what most first attempts simply can never do, which is become wildly popular in its own right, solidifying itself as an almost unattainable benchmark for cars as not just machines, but symbols of human achievement. Honestly, if the first car I ever made was accepted by the automotive community as the greatest car ever made, and then promptly set the speed record for a production car and all around became an icon both inside and outside of the industry, I'd probably just call it quits, to be honest. All joking aside, it is true that to many, the McLaren F1 was and is the best car ever made, full stop, and expressing any opposition to that is almost blasphemous. Designed by Gordon Murray, the McLaren F1 started life as a dream all car designers have, and few get to see made a reality. The absolute ultimate road car. It would achieve this by using expensive and exotic materials, pretty much ignoring the cost factor in pursuit of creating something truly amazing. In 1988, Murray sketched out his dream car, a 3-seater hypercar made of space-age materials heavily influenced by McLaren's Formula 1 history, and showed his sketch to Ron Dennis. Instead of simply dismissing this very, very expensive doodle as childish or when you're older you'll realise that it's not that simple, he said, "Great idea," and the rest is history. So why is it so special? Is a question you should never ask anyone if you find yourself sat in one at Pebble Beach. The F1 was by no means the first hypercar, but it was the first hypercar to be quite so unapologetic, by which I mean they weren't worried about how much people would have to pay for one, in its pursuit of speed, setting the speed record for a production car in 1998 at 243 miles per hour. This is a remarkable engineering achievement in and of itself, but it's made somehow more impressive by the fact this was achieved by a naturally aspirated engine. All cars, all of them, that have since broken the record, the first being the Bugatti Veyron in 2009, used some kind of forced induction, either a turbo or a supercharger, to accelerate the combustion process. More impressive still was its ability to reach these mind-boggling speeds with all the creature comforts of a pretty lavish car in the early 90s. Whatever they were, I wasn't there. The F1 was one of the first road cars to fully take advantage of composite materials. Building on McLaren's Formula 1 technology and parts bins, the car was built around a carbon fibre monocoque chassis, and the exterior was made primarily of carbon fibre reinforced polymers, all culminating in a car that weighed just 1.26 tonnes, giving it a monstrous power to weight ratio of 550 brake horsepower per tonne. The materials were not the only bold design choice, however. Staying true to Murray's original sketches, the car was made with 3 seats, placing the driver exactly in the middle of the car, something never really seen in a road car before, or since. According to those who have driven the car, this drastically increases visibility and is, well, unsurprisingly really, an ideal driving position. This choice also meant that the company didn't have to invest in creating a left-hand drive version of the car for the North American market. It does actually make a lot of sense when you think about it. It would certainly make it a lot easier to drive between countries that use opposite sides of the road. Niche perhaps, but it's an interesting take on what car design norms really are. The heart of the McLaren F1 is the 6.1 litre BMW V12 that is capable of propelling it up to 62 miles an hour in just 3.2 seconds. And up to that monstrous top speed that gave the F1 its title as the fastest road car ever made. Murray and Dennis didn't originally plan to use a BMW engine, however. Murray took a trip to a Honda test centre in the late 1980s, which impacted the development of the F1 in two major ways. Number 1. The Honda NSX was the benchmark for handling and comfort. Yes, the F1 was going to be much faster, but Murray was so impressed by the NSX's handling that he deemed it to be the gold standard for supercars. Number 2. He wanted a Honda engine for the F1 project. This trip served as an opportunity for the team to ask Honda to provide a Formula 1 based V10 or V12 engine for the F1 project. Honda declined to provide an engine to McLaren, choosing not to involve themselves in the F1 project. It was this decision that ultimately led Murray to approaching BMW for an engine, resulting in the creation of the 6064cc naturally aspirated V12 that powered the car by BMW's M Sport division. This engine, being the internal combustion powerhouse that it was, unsurprisingly produced a substantial amount of heat. We don't often think about this because in most cars the engine bay, and the body around it, is made from steel or aluminium, metals with high thermal conductivity and, relative to the heat output of the engine, high melting points. However, the F1, as we know, was not made from metal at all, but rather carbon fibre reinforced polymers. This put the engine bay, chassis and body panels at risk of deformation from the heat. This conundrum spawned one of the F1's most talked about features, its gold-plated engine bay. Yes, to move heat away faster, they plated the engine bay of the car with a thin layer of gold. While it sounds ridiculous, gold's ability to transfer heat more efficiently than almost any other metal made it perfect for this use case. But it is also a perfect example of the entire ideology behind the development of this car. Cost is simply not important. Between 1992 and 1998, 106 McLaren F1s were produced, 64 of them being road cars. Despite going out of production 22 years ago as of the time of recording, there is still an extensive support network for F1 owners. All cars today have been fitted with a wireless modem capable of remotely sending diagnostics from the ECU to one of 8 McLaren certified service centres in the world. In the event of serious issues, McLaren has been known to fly out a team of engineers to fix cars all over the world, and in the case of serious damage, such as a crash, McLaren will still accept the cars to their facility in Surrey for repair or restoration. Not many modern cars come with service like this, let alone a car from last century. But this might have something to do with how much one of these pieces of automotive history will set you back today. Though the script is very clear that I don't actually say how much that is until the end of the video, so stick around. If you're gifted with the ability to remember something I said 30 seconds ago, you might be wondering what the other 42 cars were, if not road cars. And if that's you, get ready to stop wondering. 7 were prototypes, including 1 long-tail prototype, 5 were Le Mans spec cars, 2 were GT spec long-tail variants, and the remaining 28 were GTR spec race cars. These GTR race cars were an embarrassment for everybody who wasn't McLaren. They came to an agreement with a keen race team to make a set of 9 F1 GTRs for the 1995 racing season. They raced them at Le Mans, finishing 1st, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 13th at Le Mans of 1995, beating out custom-built outright Le Mans cars. It is worth noting that while of course these cars were race modified, they were still based on road-going F1s, and in fact they had to reduce their power output to meet regulations. However, of course with the reduced weight, it still meant that the cars were faster and nimbler than their road-going counterparts. More interesting though than what the car lost, is what it kept. The racing car kept its advantageous central driving position, which must have been fantastic for racing, but bizarrely it also kept its butterfly doors, and they didn't even change out the gearbox. Basically, it was pretty obvious that these were still the road cars under their liveries and wings. The 1995 F1 GTR was claimed to produce so much downforce that it would be able to drive upside down in a tunnel at just 100 miles per hour without its tyres losing contact with the surface. Which, if true, is amazing, but obviously no one's ever tested it because it goes wrong. That's messy and very expensive. In the years following, the F1 didn't win again at Le Mans, although the 1997 car, the year that the GTR cars started being built with the long-tail body type for increased downforce, they managed to take 2nd and 3rd place, which is still very, very impressive. After 1997, McLaren's official racing efforts with the F1 were effectively curbed. The F1 was wildly successful in a number of other racing series though, having competed in over 120 races between 1995 and 1998, winning 38 of them. The McLaren F1 remains today an engineering marvel, one of the greatest machines ever made. Want one? They don't go for sale very often, and when they do, they fetch quite the fortune, with sales in recent years anywhere in the range from 10 to 20 million US dollars. But if you have 7 figures to spend on a car, nothing in the world is more prestigious than a McLaren F1. Other than maybe a palace somewhere, or a yacht, or whatever it is that these insanely rich people buy. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like it and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future.